Endangered Lands, Environmentally Endangered Lands program, and he's going to tell us more about the program. And he'll be here on Thursday, August 15th. But the thing that's really special that's coming up that I want to tell you about actually is coming up in September. I'm sure that many of you have heard about the Florida Highwaymen. Probably everyone here has heard about them in one respect or another. They are this group of painters who originated in the Fort Pierce area and have sold paintings all over this area and now all over the world. We're going to have one of the original Florida Highwaymen here in the trains room next door in September. It's down at the bottom here. His name is Robert Lewis, and he's going to be here for an evening program. And during his program, he's going to talk about his experiences as a Florida Highwayman. But while he's here, he's also going to be painting a picture for us. So I invite you back for that. That's free also. We offer computer classes and other classes here at the library, so I hope we see you back before Trains Day next year. Now, without any further delay, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Our speaker today is Jerry Brughouse. I've known Jerry for several years, but for many, many more years than I have known him, he has been a train enthusiast and a lifetime collector. He owns all of this memorabilia here, and I'm sure he probably has even more at home. So it seems to be the nature of collectors. They always have more. And today he's going to be talking about one of his many areas of expertise. He's going to be talking about the history of toy and antique trains. And I think you'll find his remarks very interesting. After his remarks, he is going to be giving free appraisals. He's going to hang around this afternoon. These exhibits will be open for a while, so you're welcome to walk around, ask him questions either about these exhibits or about anything that you might have brought in and would like some more information on. So, without any further delay, Jerry Brughouse.
Hi, how you doing? First of all, thank you for coming here today. Thank you. The society that we belong to, the Florida East Coast Railway Society, puts this on every year for the library. And to answer your first question, I think you're going to have is yes, we are nuts. It's a lifelong hobby. I've been dragged into it by my dad, who's graced us with his presence. It's been a long try. I don't know how to put it. It's been a long time collecting and learning all of this. There's a lot that I don't know, but I try to find out and research everything that I can to learn more and more, which is always something to learn. I know some of you are going to have a problem. We tried to arrange the seats just so you can see most of it without craning your necks 90 degrees. I was going to start off with the history on the toy trains. I'm sure most of you at some point in your life have had toy or model trains, scale trains, whatever. The toy trains and model trains have been around in this country and in Europe as long as there were real trains. Around the 1830s, when they really started getting popular, there were toys for the kids. Their parents worked for the railroads. They wanted something to play with, so their parents or some member of the family would make them out of wood. Sometimes machinists would make them out of steel and iron and brass and everything else. Some of them actually operated with steam. Most of them were pull toys or push toys. It was relatively a small part of the hobby as we know it today. There was not a lot commercially available. That changed drastically in the 1880s. There was a company that made toys in Germany by the name of Marklin, the Marklin brothers. In 1894, 1895, at a toy fair in Germany, they brought out 4 sizes that we use today, and some of it's pronounced wrong. What we call O-gauge trains today, which Lionel made very popular in the first part of the 1900s, is actually gauge O. Marklin designed 4 sizes. It was O-gauge, number 1 gauge, number 2 gauge, and number 3 gauge. But they pioneered the use of sectional track. Before that, most trains didn't have track. They were pushed on the floors. The live steamers that were pushed on the floors, they called them dribblers because everywhere they went there was water and puddles, but they would also set the houses on fire, set the carpet on fire. Boilers would blow up. Kids would lose their eyes and fingers and everything. It was dangerous by today's standards. There was no OSHA, there was no UL, laboratories or anything. Anyway, the 4 sizes became very popular. The most popular that almost everybody knows about is Lionel O-gauge. It's 3-rail track. It's sectional track. They started with 2-rail in a lot of stuff, but that was wind-up or push toys. When they added the 3rd rail, it was for electric. The 3rd rail in the center was what the hot power was with, and the 2 outer rails were ground. As time went on, some of the larger gauges were too big because houses were downsizing a little bit, especially after World War II. And the larger trains, such as this one right here, what they called it's standard gauge. Lionel's terminology was standard gauge. They were just too big. It took up too much room. So O-gauge was very popular. There was a lot of companies before the war. A lot of them were imported from Europe. Germany especially made a lot of the toy trains that were imported to this country. But World War I put an end to that. A lot of the companies were either put out of business completely. The Germans took over some of the factories and put them out of business. A lot of them were incorporated into other businesses, and they would condense the businesses into one. However, as I said, the main gauge that everybody used, or most of the manufacturers, was O-gauge. Today, we have HO, N-gauge, which is these 2 right here. This is N-scale, that's HO. There's a smaller one that's Z-scale. I'll just leave these track sections up here if you want to look at them. The most popular today is HO and N-gauge. There's a lot of Lionel stuff around. Something else that's getting around, it's really popular, are trains that are approximately this size that are known as G-scale or G-gauge. That's this size right here. Now you can get trains bigger than this that run on this track and smaller than that run on this track, but it's the gauge. It's very popular. A lot of people have them outside. They're indoor-outdoor trains. So there's a lot of people that have huge layouts outside in their gardens, and they're running trains that are weatherproof. I don't know how many of you have trains. If you collect the stuff, you know what I'm talking about. If you run it, a lot of the collectors today are into multiple gauges: HO, O gauge, and G gauge or G scale. I just have a few representative models here of trains. Like I say, this is what Lionel termed their standard gauge. It was a mistake. They were trying to copy the German number 2 gauge, which is exactly 2 inches wide on the rails. They made theirs 2 1/8, which was wrong. It wouldn't run on this, so when they realized their mistake, the manufacturer, Joshua Lionel Cowan, who owned the company, he was a marketing genius. He termed his gauge standard. All the other companies that had trains that size went to standard gauge. It wasn't the standard at the time, but it became the standard. After World War I, there was a lot of O-gauge stuff. This was made after World War II, but this size was very common after World War I. Lionel started in 1915 making it. American Flyer was making it since around 1908. Ives was making it around 1900. But after World War II, it got really popular. And I'm sure a lot of you recognize this. Everybody knows when you think of a Lionel streamlined train, you think of this. It's one of the most recognizable paint schemes in the whole world for a train. And it's a paint scheme from the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway for they call it a war bonnet paint scheme. It was designed for their chief trains. They were in the Southwest. They had Indian names for all the chiefs, all the trains, and that was the super chief. This size here, HO scale, is, like I say, extremely common today. N scale is very common. This is an O-gauge reproduction train of a Lionel that was made in the 20s. Today, the traditional power controlling systems for these trains was a rheostat type system, and you would vary the voltage for the speed to increase or decrease. Today, there's constant track power on the track. Most of the trains are what they call DCC. It's digital command control. They have a constant track power. There is a walk-around handheld unit. Looks like a TV remote, and you can program your locomotives, couplers. All the different scales have it. You can do everything, sounds, smoke, whatever you want, station sounds, crew talk, it's unbelievable what they have. The brakes, when the train, you slow the train down, the brakes squeal like a real train, like it's coming to a stop. Sometimes I do bigger displays and presentations on the toy trains. I didn't bring a lot this time. We brought a lot more railroad memorabilia, historical artifacts and all. We try to tie it in more with the group that's next door, which is the Florida East Coast Railway Society. I am a member myself, as are these guys. We have a couple of actual FEC employees here today, signal maintainers, Bo and Matt Seacrest back there. So if I make any mistakes on this stuff, they're going to be sure to let me know. As many of you know, the Florida East Coast Railway is one of the oldest railroads in the country that still retains its original name. Yeah, I shouldn't say its original name, but the name that it's had since 1895. Before that, Henry Flagler, when he first came to Florida, he came here for health for his wife. He went to Jacksonville and then St. Augustine. When he found the hotels in St. Augustine deplorable, unfit for human usage, he decided to build his own. The first one was the Ponce de Leon, which is today the Flagler College. He continued to buy a few more, build a few more. When he was building the Ponce de Leon, he had a problem getting materials to it. There was a small, rickety, narrow-gauge train that came from Jacksonville, and believe it or not, and this just sounds weird, but my stepson, my youngest stepson, Billy McQuillan, his great-great-grandfather was Mr. Lyons. Mr. Lyons built the first railroad from Jacksonville to St. Augustine. I don't know if I ever told you that. And we have one stock certificate signed by, and I just found this out a few years ago. We have one stock certificate signed by his great-great-grandfather, and it's in Miami in Seth Ramson's collection. It's the only one known. And anyway, Mr. Lyons sold out the railroad to someone else, and then that gentleman or company sold it to Mr. Flagler. Mr. Flagler was tired of not being able to get his product and materials that he needed down to the hotels to build because it was poured concrete. So what he did was he bought that railroad and he standard gauged it right away and brought it up to modern standards for the time, which was in the 1880s, and which is kind of backwards for us today when you think about it, but at that time it was the most modern thing that was around. As he got the hotels built in St. Augustine and the railway was operating, he would go a little further. He went to East Palatka. They built a bridge across the St. Johns River, although Palatka never really wanted him to go over there because they didn't want him to take over like he did everywhere else. They were later sorry that they didn't do it. However, he continued down the East Coast to Ormond, to the Hotel Ormond, to Daytona, eventually got to Fort Pierce in 1893, West Palm in 1894, Miami in 1894, I believe, and then it ended up going to the Keys by 1912.
You stopped at Rockledge.
Huh?
You stopped it in Rockledge for a short time.
I'm sorry?
You stopped at Rockledge for a short time.
There was a terminus for many different areas for a long time. In fact, they thought he was never going to go past West Palm Beach. And then Mary Tuttle and the Brickles talked Mr. Flagler into going to Miami. They said it was because of the weather, but it was because of tourism. Mr. Flagler saw money, and as he always did. But they ended up going to the Keys, and that got destroyed in the hurricane, but I don't want to get too far ahead. There were terminuses for the railway, what they call the end of the line, all the way down as he kept building. He didn't know he was going to go all the way to Miami and into the Keys until he kept getting further down the line. Rockledge, and I have
You need a grease hood.
something here. I'll show you. This is the only known, if any of you are familiar with Rockledge, I'm sure some of you are. Richard.
What, your arm's too short?
You guys, you knew there was a Rockledge station. The first station was on the end of a track. The train had to back to the station. This is the original blueprint when they were going to change the Y in Rockledge. Here's the Rockledge station here, the second one. This is the one that's down by the water. That's the one where the track dead-ended to that station. You've heard of the Plaza Hotel, which was a big hotel at the time? There it is right there. Unfortunately, we don't know where, there's not showing any roads on this. This was done for a property dispute. It gives you the elevations and everything. But we know where the section lines are from this, because this was done by a surveyor. So we're actually right now trying to get an overlay of the sections from the surveyor in the same scale. We'll be able to figure out exactly where the first Rockledge station was. The pictures of that station are so rare, there's only one or two known to exist. I don't have one. Mr. Branson has, I think, both of them. This is pretty unique because it shows where the trackage was and the turning Y. They didn't have a turntable here. There's only a turntable in Miller Shops in St. Augustine had a transfer table, and there was a turntable in Miami. There wasn't one in Jacksonville, right? Oh yeah, later on, but not back at this time.
One in New Smyrna.
At this time? Okay.
No, I don't know about.
Oh yeah, this is pretty early. This is 1908. So there was no turntables at the time. All the trains and the locomotives, when they changed direction, had to be turned on a Y. So the train would pull in, as most of you know what a Y is. It would pull in, go back the other way on the other leg of the Y, and it would be reversed in direction. They were moving the Y from where it was, putting in a new station, and a lot of you may or may not know, that station, Mr. Flagler was mad about the way they handled him with his property disputes. He had a track gang come in early one morning, and the whole thing was torn out before noon.
Oh, wow. On a Sunday.
Yes, on a Sunday, that's right. Nobody was prepared.
My great-grandfather said they had to turn over there because they were thinking of going over the river to Louisiana.
They were going to, yeah. There were bridges across the river in Ormond and Palm Beach to the hotels that he had built. I'm sorry, somebody had a question?
How were trains able to like be able to turn like they both have like joints on them, like they have like they make them like turn with the connectors on them. Like you see some are flexible. Like how do trains flex?
I think what he's trying to say is
How are they flexible?
how they turn.
Curves.
On a curve?
And the subway in New York.
Oh, so it's the same way with any train. It's the couplers. On the subway cars or old trolleys and interurbans, the couplers would actually swing on the end of the car, so it could negotiate a sharp curve. And the wheels, the trucks, were usually set in closer, so it would have a lot of overhang, but the coupler would swing. So they can negotiate sharp curves. But it's basically the same principle as what they have on a train today. The trucks pivot and the couplers move just a little bit, but they won't put up with a sharp curve with regular trains you see in here. Anyway, Mr. Flagler got to Key West in 1912. He died. He was born in 1830. He died in 1913. He was 83 years old. He had already gotten to Key West. That was his life's achievement, he thought. Unfortunately, the Key West extension, as beautiful as it was, and as many visitors as there was, the business that he actually built the Key West extension for, which was trade with South America, because the Panama Canal was just being opened up at that time, he thought that was going to be a huge port, and it never developed. It's ironic, though, because Key West, before 1890, was the largest city in the state of Florida. The most populous and the largest. Not in square miles, obviously, but in business terms, financial terms. It was much more business than anywhere else in the state of Florida.
Population, too?
Yeah, most populous, yes. And it's hard to think of that for the island when you had Jacksonville, Port Tampa, Naples. They were all in existence, but nothing was as big.
The buildings were more higher when the curves.
Yeah, exactly, right. Anyway, it never developed into what he thought it would be. Thank God he was already dead by then, because he probably would have tried to buy something else in South America. Anyway, and if anybody had the money, I'm sure most of you know he was a partner with Rockefeller and Standard Oil, and he wasn't very well liked. So, and he was in with Carnegie also for steel. He wasn't very well thought of by the general public because there was a lot of financial scams, you might say, and cornering the market in the oil business was not looked upon highly then. And he used the Florida development and the railroad and giving to other people as a way to pay back what he was trying to anyhow, although he probably wouldn't admit it. But anyway, they got to Key West in 1912. The railway never did much business down there. It was popular with tourists, especially to some of the fishing camps and all. But as most of you know, the hurricane in 1935 wiped out a good portion of it. Everybody thinks that it wiped out the whole railroad. It didn't. It wiped out one section. But at the time, it was just after the Depression, or actually still in the Depression, but towards the end of the Depression. The railroad didn't have a lot of money, and they were in receivership. And they figured they could have rebuilt and gone back to Key West again, but it wasn't in the bank. They couldn't do it. So they decided to sell everything to the government. I think Flagler spent around $50 million to get to Key West, and I think they sold the entire right-of-way for $60,000, I believe it was, to the state of Florida. But at that time, the state of Florida, the government was already starting to build a highway parallel to it. They were going to have ferries in certain areas for the longer bridges, like for 7-mile bridges. They were going to have a ferry service to get the people through until bigger bridges could be built. But they were already building it, and that's why there was such a great loss of life there at the time when the hurricane hit. Most of the people killed were World War I veterans that the government put to work to build that highway. Most of them were killed when they were down there.
Is Marana, that trust?
Isla Morada, yes.
Yeah, I think it's still there.
It is. The wind speed in that storm was in excess of 200 miles an hour. Anyway.
Only a handful of survivors, wasn't there?
There was more survivors than what they think, but I mean than what most people think. But yeah, there was a lot of people killed. Hundreds and hundreds of people were killed. In fact, I have a photograph, and I'll have it out here in just a little bit. You guys can look at it. I have the only known photograph of any of the World War I survivors being tended to next to one of the FEC's freight cars sitting on the track.
Most of them who survived were in the train, because they didn't get swept.
Well, the train got knocked over, right, but the train got knocked over.
It stayed there.
They sent a rescue train. Yes, sir.
How many people can fit inside trains? Like, how many people are in a subway car or in a subway train?
I don't know offhand, sir. I've never been in one.
Trains are packed a lot.
I would imagine probably around 50 people.
A lot of people are inside trains. There's like 9 of them. This guy's jacked up.
Well, back then, these were big passenger cars. There was a lot of those 50, 60, 70 people in some of them. Anyway, they sent a rescue train down, but by the time all the information got up to Miami and they got the okay by the government to send a train down, it was too late. They got snagged on a cable on the locomotive. I'm sure a lot of you have read the stories. It just got there too late. They tried to get some of the people in the train. The train still got knocked off the track by the tidal surge, by the waves. The locomotive was the only thing standing on the track when they were done. Anyway, the whole thing was closed off, gotten rid of, sold for scrap, basically. I do have some of the pictures of that. You can look at them, too. We're actually pulling the rail out of the bridges in the 30s. And it was used by a subcontractor. The FEC didn't pull their own tracks out. Anyway, a lot of the stuff we have up here, a lot of it is from the Florida East Coast Railway. There's a book here from one of the directors' meetings in 1926. We happen to have almost all of them from the 20s and 30s. I just bring one so people can look at it. But we get a lot of information out of that as to what was happening, the decisions they were making, what they were buying, what they were selling. Everything was in trusts. They couldn't just go out and buy stuff because they were in receivership. The china that you see in here, these are actual pieces. They're marked Florida East Coast Railway right on the back. These are off the dining cars. They changed the design through the years. The silver pieces are FEC. Those are not real silver. Almost all the early stuff was in the 1800s, but almost everything after 1900 was silver plated. So it's not worth a lot in terms of silver. It's worth more in terms of railroad artifacts, historical value. Conductor's hats. Well, he's got a Pullman conductor hat on, and our buddy Caboose Mike next door, the narrator, He's got his original, I don't know how many of you have been over there to see him, he's got his grandfather's original conductor's outfit on. This is an actual FEC conductor's hat from about 1918. This came out of St. Augustine. And it's a funny story. I don't want to take up a lot of time telling you, but I was up there with my family, my brothers, my nephews. We were walking around. All the girls were shopping. All the boys, we walked up San Marcos Street to go to the jail. Have you ever been to the jail in St. Augustine? Okay. Between the fort and the jail, there used to be an antique district in there. A lot of it's gone now. We're walking by a store that was now an art store, and my nephew says, "Uncle Jerry, there's a railroad man's hat right there." And I said, "Yeah, right." And he says, "You better go look." We had just walked past it. And here I am, a railway memorabilia collector, and I walked past this and this. And I turned around, almost fell over. I couldn't believe it. The antique shop had left it there when this place moved in, and they just wanted to get rid of it, so they put it in the window. It was $50. This is one of the rarest things that we have. FEC Railway from 1895 has been called Florida East Coast Railway, RY. This says FECRR, Railroad. The only time it was railroad is during World War I, when the government had control of it. And they had control of every railroad in the country, and it was called Railroad. This is a conductor's box. So this was issued by the government for use only on the Florida East Coast Railroad at that time. We do have a few pieces. One of the guys next door, Tom Chapey, just found a lantern that says Railroad on it, FEC. It's embossed just like this. It's not something somebody stamped in there. It's actually embossed. This is a conductor's box. When I opened the box, there was the complete history of this gentleman that owned this hat. He was a conductor from 1917 to 1947 on the Florida East Coast Railway right out of St. Augustine. All his information was in here. All the ticket punch, which we have here. We don't have everything out yet. They open the doors at 10 o'clock. We've been inundated with people interested in this stuff, so we haven't gotten everything set up. We still have stuff packed, but we have the original ticket punch. We have his name, all his employee passes, the cards, everything for this one gentleman. I wish I could have known him because that was pretty cool. I can't wear it. It's way too small for me. But it's an original Florida East Coast Railway hat.
Like a briefcase.
Huh?
Like his briefcase.
And his conductor's box, yes. Which is, nobody's ever seen another one. I don't even know everything that he carried in it, but I know some of the stuff he had in it was his tools of the trade, and also chits. They would have little metal tags for baggage and all, and you'd get one, there'd be two of them, with different numbers or letters, and the person that owned that baggage would get one that owned the package, and one would go on the package. They were all in there. I still have them. This is a conductor's hat from FEC, but it's a little bit later. There's stuff from Pullman cars here. There's a brush. I don't know how many of you have ever ridden on a train, on a passenger train, but you know on the back of the seat where your head goes is usually a cloth there. They call it an antimacassar or antimacassar. It depends on what part of the country you're from. We have a couple of these. These are the actual Florida East Coast Railway antimacassars that hung over the back. They had buttons to hold them so they wouldn't slide off, and they said they had the palm trees on them and everything. That was to keep the hair gel that most people definitely used back then off the seat because it would ruin the car. Ruin the seat, I should say. This tray right here is out of a buffet car. We've happened to find a set of 4 at a model train show. Somebody just had them sitting on a table. They're all brand new in the package, and it's cardboard. It's pressed board.
Yeah, we got that. We got that.
He's recording all this for the internet. Anyway, it's pressed cardboard. It's lightweight, and I'm sure not too many of them survived because of that. As soon as it got wet, it probably would have been ruined. I'm sure some of you have looked in here. The gold probably gets a lot of people's attention. These are, other than the 2, I'm trying to get them out right now. These badges other than these two from Miami, and this is a regular railway badge. This is believe it or not, this is the largest collection of Florida East Coast Railway badges anywhere. Nobody has more than this. It's unbelievable when you think about it, because there's not that many here. However, the most unique one is this one. This gentleman's still alive. He lives in Tennessee. His name is Mr. Denmark. He was a detective in Fort Pierce in the 60s and 70s. This is his original badge, and it's really unique because it's got his name on it. Most detective badges didn't have their name on them. They had a number, detective number or officer number. But it's in his original badge holder, and all his ideas in it still, with his height, the date, his weight, hair color, everything. And we've never even seen another one with the original information on it. It's kind of rare. These are other police badges. Some of these are more modern ones that have been replaced recently. These two are out of the 30s and 40s. We hunt everywhere for them. These Miami badges actually came from a collection right here in Rockledge. The gentleman passed a few months ago, and I was the one chosen to acquire his collection. These are actually, that's from the Miami Beach Railway Company. There was a trolley line that went over the bridge in Miami to the island. Yep. I believe so, yes. These, you'll see a lot of these buttons here. These are the jacket buttons. You got your jacket up? Hold that jacket up for just a second.
That's the wrong one.
Oh, the other one. All the conductors, when they wore their jackets, all their buttons had to match the railroad they worked on. And you'll see, just hold it up so they can see the buttons. There you go.
It's fine.
This is Seaboard Airline. See, it says SAL. Now, don't get that confused with a airliner. Back then, Seaboard Airline for a railway was, the names were given to them before there were planes. What airline meant was everybody wanted to get to where they were going the quickest. So if you were in Miami and you were going to Jacksonville, you didn't want to go over to Orlando and back up. You'd want to go the straightest route. They would call that you were drawing an airline from Miami to Jacksonville. That's where the name came from. It's kind of silly, but that's what it was. The Seaboard Airline Railway was one of the three big railroads in this state. It was Florida East Coast Railway, Atlantic Coast Line, and Seaboard. You see the buttons here. Every one of them has the name Seaboard right on them. If it was FEC, it would just say FEC. ACL, Atlantic Coast Line, would just be ACL. These are representational. I shouldn't say representational. These are the authentic buttons from most of the railroads in this country. And there's two more racks of them. If you're looking for any specific ones, you can see them. There's FEC, there's ACL, Seaboard, everything. The locks that you see here are two signal guys that work for the railroad can tell you how important they are. I'm sure you've heard of kids screwing with the track, throw a switch, derail a locomotive. I know one that I did it when I was a kid. He was in Boy Scouts, staying at a camp, and there was a railway siding next door. He thought it was funny, went over there and derailed the locomotive. I was a kid. I never told anybody. My dad knew about it. We didn't really know what we should do, but they fixed it. Nobody got hurt. It just came off the track. But to prevent that, they had locks. And some of these locks back then were made out of brass. They usually had their name, the railroad name right on them. Sometimes they were stamped into them. Sometimes they were cast into them. This one says Southern Pacific lines right on it. So for the Southern Pacific Railroad, this is an actual FEC lock and the original FEC key. And it's stamped FEC, but we know it's a real FEC lock because of the key design. Every one of the railroads had a different key design. The little tang here would go one way or the other and have different notches in it, different lengths on the barrel, whatever. And the signal department maintains all the crossing gates and all the signals to keep the trains from hitting each other. They have their own special locks. This is a more modern one. It's aluminum, and it's just got a wrench to open it. But most thieves don't carry wrenches around or sockets, so it's still pretty safe. This is an older one. It uses a similar style. It's made out of brass, but it says FEC right on it also. But there's special locks. They didn't use the regular switch locks. These were for the track and for certain other things, and the signal department has their own signals, own designs for the locks. I'm sorry? No, you couldn't. The pocket watches here, these are all from FEC employees at some point. Whoa!
Hello.
come over here so we can see him?
Oh,
Can you walk down?
yeah, you better.
Yeah, I'm a camera
Walk
guy,
down.
so.
He's just trying, I'm sorry. He's just trying to get all this for
I
the
understand
video.
storing the information.
Hoarding
Or
it.
use-
Oh, yeah.
Or use the tripod.
It doesn't really work.
They still use, you still have to have your watch for the railroad, keep time. But years ago, the pocket watches was the main timekeeping piece. A railway watch, there was a gentleman here earlier thought he had a watch from his grandfather. It was a railroad watch. It wasn't. A railroad watch had to be 21 joules, had to be a certain grade, and to set the time, most pocket watches, you pull the stem up, move the arms, push it down, wind it up. A railroad watch, you had to pull the cover off. There's a little tang right here you had to pull up. Then you use the stem to set the time, push the tang back down, then you would wind the watch. The reason for that was the conductors, engineers, brakemen, whoever, would time their pocket watches together and make sure that everybody on the railroad was very close to the exact same time. It was to prevent a wreck. If your watch was off and you were running 5 minutes late and didn't realize it because you thought your watch was right, somebody could get killed very easily. The reason they put the tang on there was these were in their pockets. They'd reach in their pocket. Suppose you picked it up and happened to pull the stem up and change the time. There was no way for that time to be changed unless that cover was off and the tang was pulled out. That is a true railroad watch. There are a lot of watches out there today. You'll see if somebody thinks it's a railway watch, but unless it's got that tang to pull out, or made before 1890 or 1880, it's not going to be a railway watch unless it's got it. This is a key. There was this is a signal key, a signal lock key. See, it's triangular. They had all different designs. This was from the Jacksonville terminal, which is the big station in Jacksonville that a few different railroads owned together or used. FEC was one of them.
Union Station?
Jacksonville Union Terminal. Yeah. Today it's the Prime Osborne Convention Center. You can still go to it. And oh yeah, yeah. The railroad yard was to the southwest side of it, south side of it mainly, and just to the south of that is the bridge for FEC going across the St. Johns River and goes into Jacksonville to Bowden Yard. But that station's still there. It's not used anymore. Tampa uses a station up north about 15 miles. Isn't it about 15 miles north of Jacksonville? 10 miles? I've only been there one time. It's outside of Jacksonville, which is kind of ridiculous to me. But anyway, if you see some of this stuff, if you look at it, this is a hack stand ticket. Anybody know what a hack is? Back then? A taxi, right. This was from St. Augustine in 1897 for the St. Augustine Transportation Company. It was issued by the railroad for their station. It was for that taxi, that hack, to have one location. If he didn't show up for 3 days consecutive, that spot was given to somebody else. St. Augustine Transportation Company is still in business today. When you go to St. Augustine and you ride the carriages, it's the same company. They're still in business all this time. And some of the photographs of that station, you'll see all the taxis, the hacks, the wagons, carriages lined up, backed up to the station platform. It's really pretty cool. These are Railway Express Agents badges. This one happens to be from an FEC employee, or a FEC agent out of Miami. We have all his information too. He passed away about 15 years ago. But luckily, we got to meet him, talk to him, and get his information, pictures, everything before he passed on. I don't know how many of you know about telegraphs. I know you know what they are. This is the key to send Morse code to the next station or to a dispatcher or whatever. This is the coil that provides the noise. The power. The clicking, the sounder. Sometimes they're mounted on a board like this. Sometimes they're mounted like this. Excuse me, I get hiccups. It's got a special design box to accentuate the noise. If the telegrapher at the station was busy trying to listen to someone's message or send one, and a train was coming into the station, excuse me, wow,
Trying to send a message.
And
All right.
And the phone rings. No, if a train was coming in the station, there was a lot of going on, and he couldn't listen to it. This accentuated the sound. It sounds ridiculous because it's just a little box, but you wouldn't believe the noise difference, the sound difference, and the tone. And he could be doing something else and still listening to this thing click away and read it while he was doing it. My mother's father was a new Morse code, and as a little kid I used to listen to him, and I could not believe how fast the Morse code would come across on a radio, and he would just sit there staring at the wall, listening to it, reading it like he was reading a newspaper. I couldn't believe it. I'll never forget that to this day. But I don't know it. I don't know if anybody in here knows Morse code, but it's pretty involved.
I used it. I went to telegrapher.
Were you really?
No, in Lehigh Valley in the Jersey Central.
Really?
The work towers, you had to do Morse code.
Wow. I'm amazed at any. I mean, I know you learn it and you get used to it, but it still to this day intrigues me. These small locks here, these were locks for railway mail bags so that nobody would get into the stuff en route, and it would keep it locked up. All kinds of parcel packages. This is a spittoon off the Union Pacific Railroad. You all know what a spittoon is. There's another one right there. That's the silver one that's sitting there on the counter. That's from the Pullman Palace Car Company. You've heard of a Pullman coach or a Pullman car? Pullman started off as the Pullman Palace Car Company. In 1880, it was changed. That spittoon, believe it or not, is from the 1870s, we're pretty sure. This one we think is probably from around 1900 to 1915. We're not really sure. We haven't found one exactly like it yet. There's more switch locks here, keys from all over the country for different railroads. There's regulation and rules books here. Every railroad has to have those books because everybody that works for a railroad better know those rules, and they get tested on them periodically. And brings me to just a real quick story. The guy that's next door in the conductor's uniform, his name is Mike Stark. His father and his grandfather both worked for the Long Island Railroad. Years ago, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, my dad and I were at a train show in Stewart. There was a woman that showed up, had a trunk full of stuff that she wanted to get rid of. All these other guys come out there, wanted to give her nothing for it. There was trolley stuff, there was stuff from the Long Island. And I said, how did you get this stuff? She said, well, my husband was a conductor for the Long Island Railroad. I was interested. I made a deal. I bought it. I'm sure you probably remember that. She couldn't believe I offered her a little more money than everybody else, but it was interesting because it was railroad stuff. They just wanted to, I don't know what they were going to do with it. Anyway, I'm going through the books a few years later. There's a lot of rules books. Like I say, they had to be tested periodically. You better pass the test. These guys from the railroad will tell you, if you don't pass the test, you go back and take it again or you ain't going to go to work. That's just the way it is. I'm going through these books out of this collection, and I come across, I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it be neat if Mike Stark's father's name or grandfather's name was in one of them? Sure enough, I find one, a locomotive engineer's handbook, test book, and it's got his dad's name in the cover. So we set up a whole thing at another display we had. We had a couple guys videoing it on their phones and stuff, and we set all this out on the top, and we're just acting nonchalant, and I'm throwing it out there. I said, Mike, wouldn't it be cool if your dad read through some of this stuff? Yeah, right, it never happened. And I opened that one up. He was in tears. He couldn't believe it. His dad and mom are still alive. He took it to his dad, and his mom grabs it from his dad and says, let me see that. And she starts rifling through it and finds her handwriting in the book.
Oh.
His mom used to test his dad on the book so he could pass it. It's the book, and it's got his dad's name and his mom's handwriting inside. Just a small story, but that's what makes all this very interesting to us. This phone, I'm sure you all know what an old candlestick phone is called. It looks like. This is an extension phone. This came out of the Fort Pierce station the day they were knocking it down in 69, I believe it was. We have two of those. They came from this railway detective that I have his badge that has his name on it. He had that stuff in his basement in Tennessee since the 70s. He found out I was interested in this stuff and what we did with it. He sent me a whole box full of stuff, including his badge. This photograph, almost every Florida East Coast Railway station from Miami to Key West at one time and then to Miami, from Jacksonville to the south end, had a photograph of one of their trains hanging in it. This one happens to be out of the Fort Pierce station. There's a gentleman that lives in White City, which is just south of Fort Pierce. His dad and his grandfather both worked for the railroad. He's 79. The gentleman that I know is 79 years old. His dad passed away in the 80s. When they were knocking the station down, he happened to be there also. He took this picture out of there. He took this phone off the dispatcher's desk, and he took the pool table. Fort Pierce Station was a huge station. One of the largest on the line. Had a kitchen, restaurant, 2 different waiting rooms, ticket office, baggage room, express office, but they had a pool table in there for the crews. And the reason they had that was because at the time, Fort Pierce was a division point. The trains would come south from Jacksonville or north from Miami. They would stop in Fort Pierce. There was an engine house, engine facilities, maintenance. Everything was in Fort Pierce, just like in Jacksonville or Miami. The trains would stop there. They would swap locomotives. You'd stay in your car. The train would stay the same. They'd swap the locomotive out with one that was freshly serviced, fueled up with coal or oil, whatever it was using, water, and a new crew. They'd go to the next section or to finish the run.
They went west also from that point?
At that time, not at that time. That line wasn't built until that was put in 1945 and opened in 1947. That's called the K branch. There was the line that still runs from Fort Pierce to the south side of Lake Okeechobee today. It's still there. FEC only uses from the main line 15 miles out. They call it the K-15. K meaning the K branch, Kissimmee Valley branch. 15 is the milepost. That's as far as they run. The rest of it is leased to the U.S. Sugar Railway. It's South Central Florida is a division of the U.S. Sugar. That goes all the way to Clewiston, and then it goes to the U.S. Sugar Railway, which is the actual name of it. That line was put in the 40s to cut off the long run from the original one, which came out of New Smyrna Beach, went over west, and then came all the way down to Okeechobee, and then went around the lake. But it never developed. Again, Mr. Flagler thought it was going to make him money with produce and all. Never developed. So they pulled all that up, built the one from Fort Pierce, went over there, and today that line is still in there. So it's still used. It's just that FEC only uses part of it. But I think that's going to change here pretty quick. Speaking of Fort Pierce, this locomotive plate. This came from somebody else that worked for the railway in Fort Pierce. He was a track foreman in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And any of you familiar with Fort Pierce, where Citrus Overpass is? There's a tall bridge that goes over the railroad tracks in Fort Pierce. Right in that location was where the engine house was. It was a 3-stall engine house. This was dug out of the sand where that engine house was. FEC had a number 11, and it was a Baldwin locomotive. We have no way to prove it, but if it was dug out of the property right there, it's pretty good chance that was off the original engine. And that engine was one of the engines that was used on the Key West extension when it was being built. Hopefully, that is the right one. This is a locomotive headlight. It's not a real big one. A lot of them had their number boards on the side that would be lit up at the same time. It'd have the locomotive number on each side so that when the headlight was on at night, you would see the numbers from the side, not just on the cab.
Imagine that shining in your face.
Oh, yeah, that would be pretty bright. These gauges, these belong to Richard. These are steam gauges out of a locomotive, a steam locomotive. Air brake gauges and all. There's a caboose light. This is off the Pennsylvania Railroad. This bracket was so that you could put it in a bracket on the corner of the caboose. There was different designs, though. This one was designed for a 90-degree installation. You could rotate it, but it would lock into different positions. These went on the corner of a car on an angle. If you look at, if that was facing backwards, this is off on an angle here. You could turn it, but it would go, some of them had the bracket right on the very corner, so it was like on a 45-degree angle. These are used on the back of the trains to mark the back of the train so that somebody coming up from behind them knew that they were there in the dark. If it was during the day, it would have flags or reflectors later on in the years. This is a switch lantern. This went wherever there was a turnout, a track went one way or the other from the main track, and this would turn with whichever way it was going. This looks like it's blue, but it's actually green. Now, there was a blue light or a blue marker. It would be if they were working on something, had the train locked down and nobody was allowed to use that track because somebody could be under it and get killed. But that's actually going to show green when it's lit and you're looking down the track. This is just another design, and this is how you get into them. The back will come up. You slide the pot out. Well, supposed to. It's caught. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have the lock up. This comes right out. You would pull this piece out right here. Put your kerosene in there. There's the wick. Now, we're on this one, we happen to be missing, there's a small glass chimney that goes inside. They just brought it up and magnified it just a little bit. And then the lenses had a reflective type design in them. And you'd be surprised how far down the track you can see those lights. When you're right next to them, they don't look bright. You can see them there. But when you get in line with them and that reflective Fresnel lens pinpoints it, you see it way down the track.
See, some say about 2 miles.
Usually they'd be checked every day. Like these would be going, sometimes they would be full of fuel, but they would just come around and light them when they want at night or whatever. But they burn. Bo, how long do these switch lights last? A day or two of fuel?
About 3 days.
Oh, about 3 days? See, I told you I don't know everything. These are, I'm sure you can tell, they're oil cans. They're for locomotives. They were diesel, steam locomotives mainly. These were designed with long tips so they could get in behind the bearings and oil in hard-to-get areas. This one actually came from New Smyrna Beach. We have somewhere around here I have a torch. See if you can find that torch I have, the brass torch with the cloth out the top. I'll show you in a minute if Richard finds it. This came from one of the chief mechanics in a New Smyrna engine house years ago. I got it from his grandson. It's never been used. The other torch, which Richard's going to find, actually says Florida East Coast Railway on it. The cotton in it has never been lit. He brought them home when they got a new shipment in, gave it to his grandson. They sat on his grandson's dresser for years until he was older, and then he called me. I think he's about 60 now. These are regular brakeman's lanterns. Trainmen, conductors, brakemen, whatever, they'd use a lantern for signals to back up, stop, whatever the signals were, whatever they needed to do. I'm sure you know it's a shovel. It actually says B&O right on it. It's an actual B&O locomotive shovel. All the locomotives had marker lamps on them, or they were supposed to, if they were road locomotives especially. And what that would do is tell someone what class that train was running in at that time. And this one's showing green right now, which meant that that was an extra section. If, say there was a passenger train and it would haul 100 people, and there was 200 people or 150 people that wanted to ride it to go somewhere, it would have 2 sections. Well, the first train would be made up and leave. There would be another train behind it. This is that would be showing green markers. It is a second section or a third section. Sometimes, Mike, they would run 4, 5 sections. Sometimes 7. That's Mike. That's the gentleman I was telling you. He's got his grandfather's conductor stuff on. If they had an extra train, if it was a train that wasn't in a schedule normally, it would be white markers. And all the engine crew would do is climb up, flip these levers down, and it would go white.
How about that?
It's internal. There's 2 lenses inside. Can you see that? Sorry.
Do they still use that?
They have regular markers now. Not like this though. They're totally different. They don't have the. They use. Oh, there you go. This is the torch. Can you imagine working in the dark with that instead of a flashlight or a floodlight? That's all they use. And it says right on it, Florida East Coast Railway. It's embossed right in the bottom. It's never been lit. You fill it with kerosene and light it and have to hold it there while you're working on whatever you're working or whatever you're doing. I can't even imagine trying to work with that, but that's the way they did it. There's a cooler, engine crew that would have water in that to keep right in the locomotive or in the caboose or whatever. Speaking of the locomotives and the crew, you see these lanterns, you see how the bottom is just a wire hoop. These are actually lead or cast iron sometimes. These are specifically locomotive lanterns. They sat on a platform up on the back of the boiler, and it was heavy so that it wouldn't vibrate over the lip. No matter, because in a steam locomotive, the cab is constantly kicking back and forth with the drivers and the drive rods, as you can see on this one. They weren't even, obviously, so one was pushing when the other one was going in, so the cab, the back of the locomotive, would go down the track like this. Well, everything would vibrate. They always had cast iron or lead bases.
But didn't they sometimes have some of those on the cabooses?
Only if they happened to have extras and they were using them. They would use this style normally, but this is, most of these actually will say right on them, locomotive. Sometimes right on the glass, sometimes embossed. It's an actual locomotive lantern. Lantern. This looks more modern, but believe it or not, this is not really that new. This is, I'm sure you've seen or know of the little motor cars that the crews used to ride up and down the tracks on, little four-wheel carts. This was one of the lights that mounted on them. There's a bracket on the back, and they just hang them on each corner, sometimes right in the middle. Fairmont Motor Corporation is who made them, but this is probably out of the, even though it uses batteries, it's still probably out of the 40s or 50s. You see a lot of stoves on eBay, on Craigslist, old potbelly stoves. People think, right, oh, it's a caboose stove, it's a railroad stove. They're doing that because they want to try and make the money. I can't bring a stove. They're too heavy. We have a few of them. We have too many of them.
3.
Yeah, right. Anyway, most railroad stoves, cabooses, whatever, would have something right on it that says railroad or the railroad name cast into it. This is the fire door off of one, and you can see it says caboose right on it. Some of them just said railroad, railroader, or they'd have the actual railroad name. If it was a big enough railroad, they'd have their own castings done. Speaking of size of railroads, Florida East Coast Railway, with all its tourism, hello, how you doing? the size of the railroad for Florida East Coast Railway, even though it was so big with tourism and passengers, in 1954, I have a book I can show you. In 1954, they only had 208 passenger cars. In comparison, the same year, the Pennsylvania Railroad had over 6,000 passenger cars. A railroad like that could have their own name cast right into something. FEC never did, never would. They weren't big enough. We're talking about the markers for the back of a caboose or a train. This is a flagman's kit. Now, I don't want anybody to get near this with a lighter, but this has the actual fuses that they would use if there was a train stopped unexpectedly, let's put it that way, somewhere. The brakeman or flagman at the back of the train would jump off and set these flares back so many feet behind the back car, caboose, whatever it was. He also had a flag in there, and that's an original. This is from the Pennsylvania Railroad. That's the original flag for it. And you can see the strap and everything. These hung right into cabooses. Sometimes they were in the locomotives, whatever they needed it for. I mean, whatever they were doing, they had a flag or a way to stop the train behind them, or at least try to. They also had a piece called a torpedo. Yes, sir?
No section for torpedoes in there?
No, there's not. I know, well, it might be in this end, but there's none in there. They had a torpedo as a little piece. This is a section of rail. This is not quite as big as the rail they use out there right now, but they would have a torpedo would strap on right on the top of the rail here, and when the wheel and the flange, when the flange hit it or the wheel hit it, it would produce a loud explosion, and it would alert the engine crew or whoever was around. If it was a caboose and the train was backing up and it hit it, the caboose crew would hear it and alert the engine crew to stop the train, where they'd pull the air. Real quick, we're just about out of time. This is a locomotive. This is called a grip bag from a locomotive crew. This is the engineer's grip bag. This is probably from around 1915, 1920. It came from an engineer. Well, that's who we got it from. It's all leather. He would have all this stuff in there that he needed. His gloves and scarf and hat and everything would be kept in there until he put it on when he was working. This is a passenger car quarter step. The train would stop, the doors would open, he'd jump out, set this down so you guys could climb right in without having to climb up too high to the first step. This one happens to be fairly new compared to some of them. This was probably made in the 50s. It's aluminum. Before that, they were stamped steel. Before that, they were cast iron. And Richard just got one that is all wood, which was probably before the turn of the century. He just doesn't have it yet. One of his friends is bringing it down from up north. The crews, the gangs that worked on the track, this was used for hauling ties. They put it down over the cross tie. Two guys, you could drag a cross tie wherever you were going. not many of them want to work like that anymore. I don't know if I would want to. This is an elevation gauge, so to speak. You had your track, and I know not all of you can see. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can get somewhere a little bit better. Why don't you bring that, the other one too, the gauge.
Oh, the heavy one, right?
Yeah. Good planning. These are just representational sections of track, so you guys can get the idea of what I'm talking about here. Our normal track gauge is 4 foot 8.5 between the rails. That's what they call standard gauge. On a curve, the track is super elevated on most curves if it's a higher speed curve. It's super elevated, so as the train goes around, it tilts into the turn a little bit, just like you would want to. A quick way to gauge it was with this. They were all half-inch increments. You put one on the on the outside rail, and you could know exactly what your gauge was for the speed or the size of the curve or whatever. It seems pretty basic, but it is. This actually came, again, the guy that had the two copper torches, the oil can and the torch, these were some of his father's tools that they had. This came out of the New Smyrna yard, and this is an actual FEC tool, and you could just gauge, look at the difference there. Now, if you're making a left turn, you'd certainly want to be banked a little bit, so that, just like a race car track, you want to go into the curve, otherwise it goes off. Unfortunately, just like what just happened in Spain, you go around a curve too fast, the train comes off the track. That is shocking to watch that on TV.
It was
They still use stuff like that now?
It's a lot different than this. Yeah, they do have it, but it's a lot different. Yeah, it still works on the same principles, but yes. It's sad to see what happened over there, though, I'll tell you that.
video is just awful. The video messed up my day for real.
This was a track gauge. This would hook over like that. Oh, I'm sorry, like this, and go right in. No, right there. So they could gauge the track, no matter where they were working. If they were pulling spikes, changing out a cross tie, tide plates, whatever. He had this. Instead of using a tape measure, they just put it right in between the rail. Sometimes they would. I'm not sure exactly how they would do it, but they would give certain areas have to be a little bit wider for a turn to flange it. So this might be a straightaway, a straight section of track gauge, and then on curve it might be a little wider to make room for the flanges to actually make the turn without anything binding up. I'm not sure which this is. I never measured it to see, but I do know that it is an authentic one, and it's right from the FEC yard. Oh, I'm sorry.
Now, everywhere was the gauge, like you have what's known as narrow gauge. There's no narrow gauge in Florida, right?
Not anymore, no. There was a lot of it. There was a lot of different gauges. It was narrow gauge, broad gauge. Broad gauge was like 5 foot between the rails, or bigger. Some of them were 6 feet, but most of them were narrow gauge in Florida.
Okay.
The main problem was the soil was soft. The smaller area they had to actually fill and make a hard surface, the easier it was for them. To make a standard gauge took more fill, more work, and in our boggy ground that we have here, it was too soft for a train. So the narrower they made it, the less fill they needed.
Okay.
So anyway, I'll get done here real quick. This is just this is what some of these guys have to swing around to bolt track together. Just pick this up and think about swinging that to try and bolt the track. Just 2 sections together takes about 8 to 10 bolts. The old steam locomotives, they had a grate on the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that unfortunately.
Up a window with a post.
Oh. The wrenches, I'm sorry.
Imagine getting hit with that.
Huh?
Imagine getting hit with that.
Yeah, really. There's another heavy piece there. You want to grab it?
Why don't you move the post out of the way?
Grab the incher, not the wrench, just the car incher. That's the last thing.
I always get the heavy stuff.
You survived Vietnam, you can do it.
Oh, yeah,
My hero.
sure.
Anyway, this is the wrench I was telling you about. This is just this is still used today. It's a regular track wrench. It just happens to be a certain size. You got it? Yes, sir.
That's one big wrench.
Yes, it is. There's a little bit smaller one there, but I'll tell you what, it's just about as heavy. I was starting to say, the steam locomotives had a grate, the coal or wood. If they burned oil, they didn't have to clean the grates, but on a wood burner or a coal burner, they had to shake the grates. This was the tool that the fireman or the engine hostler or the engine house worker would use to clean it. He'd have to reach up inside and grab the grates and actually shake all the crap that didn't burn, all the chunks of junk would shake out into a pit. They'd let it cool and then dig it out. That's an actual one that came off of out of the roundhouse, out of the engine terminal in New Smyrna Beach that was used on the FEC engines. And then,
You need to feed him.
I know, he's hungry. Last thing. Say you got a freight car sitting on your siding. Everybody owns their own siding, right? You got a freight car sitting on your siding. You're a business. And you don't want to have to pay the railroad to come and move the car down the track just a little bit so the next one could come in or whatever. They'd have a car incher. And this, see the pieces on the bottom, actually fit over the rail. This would go up against the wheel, and you'd actually push down on this. It was just a lever, and it would actually, they call it, it would move it just a little bit, and the car would start moving. You could move a loaded freight car with this little bar right here. Only because of the fulcrum, the actual leverage that you had. This is a pretty heavy tool. I know he was complaining, but, he does that about everything, so.
He'll get you for that.
There's different designs of them made. This just happens to be one of the more complex ones. There's some real basic ones, but you'll still find them around, but I don't think they use them too much anymore. I'm sorry I took up so much of your time. I wish I had more time, really. I wish I had brought more stuff, but we can only haul so much. Is there any questions? Anybody got any information? I mean, I could talk here for hours, but
I was curious to know if the railroad or the conductors or the people who worked on the railroad, they had to buy their own uniforms and watches and everything? Was that also
the watches, yeah, the watches actually had to be inspected periodically, and that was still their cost. That was their job. They paid for that stuff, yes, sir.
Oh.
Yep. Yes.
How long did the strike last that they had in the 60s?
Technically, if you ask some of the guys that work for the railroad, they're still on strike.
All the engines
Am I right?
Yeah.
When did they actually really kind of get out of that problem? You remember?
I think
80?
it was the early 70s.
Oh, I thought it was around 80 or 81. Was it that early?
Well, I hired on in 73, and there was still a lot of people on furlough and everything, so I really don't know when it happened.
Yeah, they still consider themselves still on strike,
The
basically.
engines in Jacksonville just rusted.
Oh yeah, a lot of stuff that just sat, yeah. But some of the guys that hired on during that strike still work for the railroad. They call them scabs, and they're still. Is Shelley here today?
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, one of the main engineers for Florida East Coast Railway is here today. His name's Dave Shelley. He's probably next door. You can go talk to him. How long has he been working for them?
Almost 42 years.
Almost 42 years he's been running trains on this railroad. He's a good guy. We call him ECH, East Coast Hogger.
Oh, yeah.
Give me one second. Yes, sir.
How long did it take people to build the tracks and train stations?
Well,
That's a good question.
That's a good
question.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to show you something. What was your question, sir?
I read somewhere FEC is going to start a passenger service again.
Yes and no. It's and I'm not authorized to talk about it, but just the basic plan is Florida East Coast Industries owns Florida East Coast Railway. Florida East Coast Industries also owns All Aboard Florida, which is the new passenger service. They're looking at putting in double track line, and the railway, the freight railway, would be responsible for the track maintenance and all. They're talking about putting a double track line, and it looks like it's going to go through. They just finished with land negotiations between Cocoa and Orlando along 528. They're going to double track the main line from Miami to Cocoa, and then it's going to go over to Orlando. There won't be stops and stations everywhere. It's not going to be a commuter train. It's not going to be something you just get on whenever you want. It'll go from Miami, it'll stop in Lauderdale. At this time, this is the plan. Miami, stop in Lauderdale, stop in West Palm, and then straight through on a curve all the way to Orlando Airport. What they did was, the two, believe it or not, the two most visited cities in this country don't involve New York City, don't involve Las Vegas. It's Miami and Orlando. More people visit those two cities than anywhere else in this country. The traffic that's between the 2 points, both in the air, which takes forever to get on an airplane, and on the road is phenomenal. They did a study, they figured there's nothing better than a train. And they've already ordered the trains. There are 9 car sets, locomotive at each end, or a locomotive power unit on one end, control car on the other, but it'll look like 2 locomotives, 7 cars in between. Supposed to be a dining or buffet car, 2 first-class cars, and the other ones will be second-class cars. It's supposed to go, as far as we all know, it's going to go through. We will have passenger service, but it's not going to be like what you think it is. However, the stumbling block for Amtrak to get in on FEC is because FEC is operated as a freight railroad. Freight rules. Amtrak and passenger service is totally different. If they get into the passenger service rules, once they put in their own service, and by the way, it's not funded by any government agency, none of our tax dollars, nothing. It's them putting their money in, over $1 billion. Right now, I think it's up to $1.5 billion. Am I right, Bo? Somewhere around there? Once they put that in, now they run on passenger rules, passenger train rules, then it's easier for Amtrak to come in, which will be I think a good thing. I would ride it. Personally, I live in Fort Pierce. I would ride it just to go to St. Augustine for the weekend instead of driving. Yeah. I think a lot of people would use it, but remains to be seen. So. Oh, yes.
Now, is this any different from that high-speed rail?
Yes, it's totally different. That's a whole different program. This is going to be high speed, but not high speed like what they were talking about. This will be running between 70 and me. They were talking about 110 miles an hour. That'll be probably the maximum. So that's going to be in areas where there's nothing.
Well, 125, they were saying between Cocoa and Orlando.
Possibly.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But are they going to do that?
Ooh, Holland.
The other high-speed train,
Yeah.
that was kind of
That's
kicked out. Yeah, I don't know what's going to
The
happen.
one we voted for?
Yeah, right, exactly.
What is the Sun Tree one?
The what?
The Sun Tree, what is that?
The Century.
Sun Tree.
Oh, so I don't know. You had a question, sir?
When is it supposed to be implemented?
They were supposed to have the trains running 2014.
Now they
It's
pushed it
gonna
back to
be
2015.
Another 2 years probably. They had a lot more land negotiation problems than they thought they were going to have. But it still looks like it's going to go through without a doubt, which will be pretty cool. The thing is, it's going to be 13 round trips a day extra on these tracks here. That means 26 extra trains, either northbound or southbound. Plus, there's going to be more freight trains. The Panama Canal got widened, so the ships that go through there are called Panamax ships. They're much wider, more capacity. FEC had the new president of the railroad, Mr. Hertwig, has some foresight, and that's the phone again. I wish. I wish. He started in Miami with redoing the port, and they got a brand new rail lead into Dodge Island, right onto Dodge Island. So I think starting the beginning of next month, August, am I right? The new container trains are going through, Bob?
Oh, I'm not sure when that's.
I think it's supposed to be beginning next month. 2 more trains, freight trains start a day. It's going to be all containers from Miami, from the port. That's just the freight. Then if the passenger service gets going, that's going to be another 13 trains each way every day. Now, it's not just going to be between 8 and 5. They'll be running at night, too, I'm sure. But that's 26 trains a day there, plus the 2 from there. It's going to be pretty busy on these tracks. So I told them what they need to do is just do what NASCAR does and put the clear visqueen on the front of the locomotive. So when they hit something, they can just peel it off.
I saw something that speaks to Obama said about going to Jacksonville to suggest widening the port so that the cargo ships could get into Panama.
Yeah, but they want it, but Miami, everybody's trying to upgrade right now. Deeper port, wider berths, more access from rail and trucking. The problem is most of the ports are so congested right now that they can't get much more in there. And luckily, the railroad still owns trackage into them. They're redoing Port Everglades. In fact, they just knocked down the FPNL power plant 2 weeks ago, I think, that was
Yeah.
down there. They're going to build a new one. West Palm Beach is done, or being done right now, and I think they're just going to keep moving up the coast. And I know, exactly, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, really. Yes, sir.
All right, you guys.
Melbourne
ready
still
to
has
go?
plans on for a rail
Got another
station.
question?
Now, you're talking about this one,
Right.
the main line, and it's going to just go straight through. Are they looking at another system, or are they?
That was for Amtrak.
That was for the Amtrak?
Yeah, a lot of the towns along the coast, when Amtrak was first talking about coming here, they added stage stops, because Amtrak right now, when you come down from Orlando, goes through Sanford and all, and Orlando, and then Kissimmee, and then goes to Okeechobee and comes in at West Palm Beach. So the stations that were going to add between Jacksonville and West Palm Beach was going to be Stewart, Fort Pierce, Vero, Melbourne, Daytona,
St. Augustine,
and then they'd be right back into the terminal they have now in Jacksonville. Some of the stations are still in existence. Titusville still has a station, a FEC station, but it's used as a maintenance away office right now and yard. St. Augustine still has a station. They were talking about using that again. I don't know what's going to happen, but Amtrak right now is not really pushing to get through here. We'll wait to see what happens when they open up this other thing. The other thing is, with all aboard Florida, FEC's passenger train, with the double track, right now with the freight trains, they have to make sure they meet at certain spots so one can pass the other, which is dangerous. Let me put it this way. It's not dangerous because of their signaling system. Right, Bo? That's right. Another 40-year employee, right? 40 years this guy's been fixing the signals on this railroad. Unbelievable. Anyway, it's still what they consider a single-track main line with passing sidings. To me, when you think about it, that's dangerous. If anything did go wrong, which it usually doesn't, but if anything ever did go wrong and they hit head-on, somebody's going to get hurt. And it has happened in the past, but, you know, once they have double track, you can basically use one track just like they used to, one for northbound, one for southbound. It may not always work out that way, but it'll be a lot safer. Once Amtrak sees that, and the government sees that, it might be a lot easier to get Amtrak down here. So, and
Alright, we are going to move to number 1. So, kids may be able to drive the train. Here we are. Coming back. Now flip the camera around a little bit later. Thank you for joining us here. Trains. Notice that I did not break at all. I might as well keep it going. Alright. Junior engineer program will be starting up. Here we go.
And here's one running train number 336 right now. This train is a very heavy train. This particular train running at 12,000 tons. On the way, folks, on the way. Back up. Okay, now 336 is running now. Here he goes around the same point. You're doing great. Follow your train. Make sure you don't lose any cars off the map. Loshi, I'm moving. We're down. You're up. I'm up. Where's the engine? Where's the brake? Right there. Okay, that's fine.
Where is Mike?
On the north end. On the north end. Yeah. Are we down? We're coming. No, they got it fixed. I'm going to be on the back side.
We'd like to welcome all our friends at home who are watching on Ustream right now. Thanks for joining us. We are ready for another engineer.
Yep. It's on the north side.
Who is number 14, please? Would you raise your
Right, just turn it in. Turn it down. Turn it. 6 o'clock. Yeah, perfect. Just like that. You want to line me for the main? Okay, you're in the main. All right. You are in the main straight through. Avery, we're going to park right here. Okay, great. Now you still have your card? Take your card, use Mikey, and he'll give you a punch, okay? All right. I'm here. Great, thank you. Okay. Hey, Danny, it's great. Now we're up. Keep going. What? Somebody's shorting way out somewhere. We're on the south end now. I mean, it's just us. Okay. Danny, it's great. See the train up there? We're going to go right alongside it. Danny, it's great. The other way, and that slows it down. See the train that you're meeting there? So right up next to it, keep going. All the way to the end of this train. Bring your train. Hi. How you doing? Got your point? Okay. Nancy, okay, Nancy. That's your throttle. Hang on to the cord. When we're done, we'll take that back to the booth mic and get a punch, okay? That's your train. Okay? Just like that. Reverse, pull, stop, forward, and you just on that, and you rewind for the main, and go. Perfect. Great. Danny, give it some gas. Ultimately, my line up the gas at about 12 o'clock. As inch up. Ooh. Yeah, perfect. See that? Gaining speed, notching up.
Mr. Greg Starr.
They're EMDs. Yes. They're no, they are not GM. They are not GMs. EMD. Electromotive Division. EMDs.
Nancy Spot.
That's this one. What? Who makes your engine? Who makes the EMD? What the hell? Okay.
Yeah, mine has a little bit in it, right? Oh, wow.
We'd like to thank everyone for their patience. We'd like to say the Junior Engineer program is our most popular program by far. We have the faces of all the kids. All of them run those trains. I can't say them. Run the trains. Next. Who has number 17, please?
Time, John. Okay, that's the train. It'll, Logan was a casual.
The 17 is here. Who is it? Is it? Who is number 18, please? Who has... Oh, I don't forget that. I'm thinking about Thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. There is no question that junior engineer is our most popular function of all. Thanks for being with us today. Little number 18, little Abby is next for the next available training group. We will have her take the next thing around. In the meantime, who has ticket number 19? Great, we found 19.
Yeah, this one? Yeah. Lift it up and turn that wheel all the way up. Do me a favor, open the one on this side. Yes. Hold up. Open it up. That little wheel right there. Move it up. Yeah, up. Keep going? Yep, up. There it is. Okay, thank you.
Great, ready for you.
Abby is next.
I'm not even ready.
Okay, Tom is ready. Can we take Abby over to Brevard? Abby is our next junior operator. Come on, Tom. Who has number 20, please? Would you hold up your hand and show me who has ticket number 20?
I'm ready. I'm sorry. My bad. My bad.
Oh, yeah.
No, maybe. All right.
Where's number 21, please? Number 21. As you can tell, junior engineer is our most popular program, and you can see why. And number 20, engineer number 21.
Once that train comes by and boom,
Who has number 22, please? Who has number 22? Would you hold your hands up, please? 22. 22, we found number 22. Number 22.
Get on that.
Very careful all the time. Where's Luke?
Oh, shoot. All right, I'm coming at you. All right, we're waiting. Get in line. Get down.
Keep an eye on you here.
All right, I hear our other trains coming.
Yeah, that was. What's
This is how it is on the road.
I didn't. We just saw on the corner.
Nope, you're doing good. Van. That's the young lady. Van. He's going to drive right by.
Somebody hit it with the eraser or something. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and meet this train. Again, you want to run at about 12 o'clock. 7 to 12. Perfect. Right? And you're going to pass this train here. Come on in, folks. There's plenty of room for everybody. Our junior engineer program is by far and away our most popular part of the program. See if we can get out of the hole. Right next to
Mike Smith, if you're watching, I just had
Right now we got
Here's number 24, please. Did you all look at it?
I think we got it fixed.
Okay. Sorry. Chris is the junior engineer. It's kind of easy to do. It's so small. Bob, back up.
That looks better.
Number 24, please.
We were rocking, so we got this time.
And number 24.
All right.
What's your name? Everybody knows. Eleanor, you will be. Like you want to say?
More realistic. We're on the back side. This one's
Oh, yeah. What is intended?
Are y'all finished?
Well, little Eleanor will be back.
Yep. The little fanciest tripod you ever seen. Here's Dominic. Can't see you. You have to walk a little bit further away.
Thank Alan for being our junior engineer.
I know. Something's killing it. My man! Oh, well. The expert killed the track.
And you guys were the one who signed it like this
You're doing an excellent job. See all the oranges on the tree? See all the little
That's clear. I like that.
I like all the oranges all on the ground.
Just a moment.
I know, buddy. That's another train. That's what is it?
Mr. Tom Byron, working his camera magic.
You know what? I just want to say, these guys, the big guys, are having so much fun here. Showing these little kids how to do this. This is just great to see.
It's great to see it.
Great to see it.
How many rail fans or engineers or conductors or how many people do you think we're going to work for the railroad out of this bunch? I say
We'll get a couple.
we'll get a couple.
Yeah.
Not all, but a couple, probably a couple rail fans. I don't know.
Look at Tom Chapey. He's over there. He's right underneath Titusville. He's got a big old grin on his face.
He's into it. Excuse me.
No, because you're going to run right into the machine.
Here we are at Titusville Auto Ramp. Now we're trying to.
Huh? Yes, yeah.
Right this way. Right up here, higher than you go, and climb aboard your train. 26. 26, come right over here, my Danny. That's number 27, please. Would you hold up your hand? Stay right there.
It'll go as fast as you twist that. There you go. That's as fast as it's going to go.
Look at your train.
Did you stop it?
Made it stop. How about
He
that?
hit the brakes, did he, huh? All right. That's fast. That's all the way fast. Yeah, it's look at this for a moment. All right. Now you can speed up and go.
Back. You may go back.
Yeah, so I apologize for that. Yeah. All right, buddy, we're going into the back road. Get ready to slow down. You're gonna park your train right here. Right where my finger is, where I'd like you to stop. The other way, the other way, the other way, the other way.
Oh!
All right. My bad.
Look at all these kids. Oh my goodness. It's crazy. But it's crazy good. Like Pop-Tarts. Crazy good.
Number 30. Class number 30, please. Hold up your hand for 30. 31.
Hey, Loesch, we're coming at you. Come on.
29, 28, 29.
The bird is a word.
30.
Check out 336. No, 335 is coming south of Hialeah.
31. Who has number 31, please? Would you hold up your hands so I
Okay? And you remember how to control your speed, right? Fast, slow. Plug in once in a while. Make sure we maintain.
We're going to have a meet in Palm Bay.
Okay. Are you next in line? Be sure you get the next numbers. I'm not doing numbers. I'm just.
Uh-oh.
No, he's all right.
Oh, train crash.
I got it. We had an overrun before. I did not reset that. Sorry about that. All right, go, Brian, go.
Okay. Meet in Palm Bay.
I'm gonna let you pass right by me, buddy. Okay, it's 41. Stopping here. Is that you? 32. There we go. All right, Joshua. You ever operated train before?
No. You know what's cool about this? This is the defect detector Mom called 180.3. Here's Vieira Boulevard. Defect detector.
We're going to
check hot box, dragging equipment, and wide load.
It goes faster. What happens when you want to slow it down?
When the train is finished passing over it, there is a mechanical voice
Give it a twist.
that comes on. The message does come on right after, right after the train clears the detector.
Hold it for me.
Let's enjoy this train.
I'd like to thank everybody for being patient with us this afternoon. As you can tell, Junior Engineer is our most popular segment of all. We're up to number 32. Who is number 32?
We're up. Yeah.
Down here. Who's number 33?
There you go, buddy. You're in charge now. The other way. There you go. Just let it sit there for a while. Yeah, just like that. There you go.
Going through the defect detector.
Dominic is ready with number 34.
Yes. Oh my God.
I'm going the second time.
Oh, second time. All right. You're in line for another one.
Number 35.
Make the loop and stop just before the switch.
All right. Just right.
36, please. Hey, Dominic. Sticking number 36, please. Would you all open your hands so I can find you? 36. Somebody's got it in the pocket. 37. Please hold up your hands so I can find you. 37, please. Who has number 37? 38. Who has 38? 39. Who has 39? Wait. Come right this way, little one. Off.
I don't know anything about the inside. I let somebody else do it, so I don't know what happened. I just know what I ended up with.
39. Who has ticket number 40? Would you please check your tickets? Which one has number 40? Just hold up your hands so I can find you. 41? Anybody who has 41?
We don't have the road right now.
Who has 41, please? Would you please hold up your hands so I can find you? 41. 42. Who has 42? Which one are you 40? Here. And I'm going to ask you to upstairs. When the train is open, they're going to have you. The Florida East Coast Railway Society thanks you all for joining us this afternoon. We're delighted that you're here. We know the kids are having fun too with the Junior Engineer program.
It's coming. All right, it's coming. All right.
Okay, we have one engineer. Oh, yeah. There's plenty of room for folks. It just doesn't seem like it. We are having more fun with the junior engineer program than any other part of our program. Can you turn it up?
Turn it up right around there. Good job.
Yeah, we're over here.
Follow the man, follow the man. Okay, you're coming up on the focal yard. That's going to be your point.
Winner. Oh yeah, it's the apple sign.
What?
The apple sign.
Is that what you always post on?
Oh yeah.
I was at Richard Road. I had a kid come with me that night. I had called in.
He knew all about it.
And here's the famous engineer himself.
Look out. He's starting to crack.
Mr. David Shelley, almost 42 years of service on the FEC.
Mr. Matt? Mr. Matt,
Secret.
single apartment?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Apartment.
You're all got all that junk and yeah.
Hey, my section looks good.
He keeps the crossing gates working great.
Oh yeah.
We got half the railroad here.
I'll find a gate for you to fix. How about that?
My name is.
Take care, man. Nick, you're on TV. Say hi. You're gonna be on YouTube. Oh, I'm gonna be where? YouTube tonight.
Gotta be on YouTube.
We have the signal maintainer himself, Bogard, Mr. Tony Guido.
Oh, I'm headed down here.
Now Liz.
I'll see you down here. On Monday I'll be at that North Lake Park runaround. When you get the machines out of there.
Number 43, please. Who has number 43? Would you hold up your hand so I can find you? 43? Is 43?
Tom's ready.
Okay. 44. Who has ticket 44, please? Would you hold up your hand so I can find you? 45. Who has 45? 46. Ticket number 46.
There.
We found number 46. Kenny, take a seat. Danny, we're going to send you see your hand in the back.
Thank you.
Go right back there. 47. Who has 47? Right here. 47. What's your name? Chrissa? Chrissa has 47. Are we ready now? Chrissa? But you come right over here with Denny and with Bob. Right this way. Go underneath the rope.
We're not running.
Who's running the train? I apologize, Chris. We have to make it shorter.
Sorry.
The second one. At what point is back there?
Waiting at Palm Bay siding for, I believe, 446.
Oh yeah, look at them. They're going, come on, get the train moving.
Get it moving already!
For my appointment, I gotta get to school. I got a math test.
Forget school, forget math test.
Wait a minute, it's important.
Once again, we'd like to welcome our friends watching on Ustream today. That address is www.ustreamtv.bbt609. If you would like to see any or all parts of today's program when you get home this evening, you're welcome to do so at that address, BBT609. There is absolutely no question in anybody's mind that the junior engineer program is the most popular part of
I know the section All right, we'll show.
Person number 47 is our next junior officer.
I'll be in touch with you guys. All right, bro, you going?
I'll be right back.
All right.
Free. It's not super cool, whatever. I don't take technology.
So,
Give me an F-106 cocktail.
Oh, nice.
how many engineers we have so far?
55.
55 engineers. How about that?
Young man, if he wants to upload photos from his drive today to the website, how would he do that?
Which website?
Well, I don't know. Would FECNTRAK.org or is there a FECNTRAK actual website? I don't know.
You can send it to them. Probably send them to me. I'll send it to them. Because I'm in the society as well.
He's like our resident.
You're the IT guy?
Yeah. They were like, how can I get my pictures off my phone?
I want a 13, a mobile 13-link computer satellite that runs on the Space Center. Software. You need hardware stuff, I can get you up and running.
Yes, these three for our okay?
Hey, Mr. Mike Smith. Hey, Tommy, what engine do you see there that you can really recognize?
Yep.
Watch out there if you're going to hold up.
Did you see her right where you're at, Bree?
It looks pretty. It's a pretty looking one.
Yes. I'll hold your ticket. We hold your ticket. There's no tab. You know how to make it go faster? Yep, this way.
Turn that knob there when I tell you to.
Congratulations to Kai, our newest junior.
Well, this is as close to my railroad as I get.
We have 48. I'm not skipping anybody, right? 49?
Yeah. You're down?
I'm not on a switch.
We have 49.
Yes. That's part of our
Trying to fix it.
Number 49 is next.
FEC with a Seaboard Coastline caboose? Weird.
The Far East Coast Railway Society would like to thank all our friends and guests this afternoon for joining us. It's a really nice afternoon out. The fun is actually inside where the railroad is. Taking a look around at all the little faces, all the happiness. Delighted that you're all here. Our junior engineer program is, without any doubt, the most popular
Mr.
part
Thomas
of
Chafee.
our entire day.
Talking to the folks on Ustream watching at home.
Give them a chance, Dave.
And Mike Smith is watching as well. So see, so you better be good.
Constant maintenance. Batteries. You know what? This is really hard to work right here. Really separate.
Well, that's exactly right. Trains are very historical. I'm surprised they may not be very smart. 50, thank you. We have 50, 51. Which one did I give you? Did I give you 52? Okay, I have 51. I have 50 and 52. And you have 52, which is 51. Okay, I have both of them.
Thank you.
This is a great stall. Our dispatcher.
We're dispatching a bunch of kids right now. Hi, Denny. 52. 52. 51. Where are we going?
Check it out, Cocoa Yard. Boom!
I know, but honey, the road was dangerous. Let's step back here.
Here it comes.
Back.
We're here early. Absolutely.
When's that lunch?
Did you get your chance yet to drive the train? No. Oh, good. 53. Okay, maybe I'll get you. I don't know. We'll see who's next in line. All right, we're gonna go right up to the signal here.
Pulling into Palm Bay siding.
Nice.
What train is going to be met up? I don't know. We got 335 heading south right now. Check them out.
Chafee's running with me. Yeah, just stay with Chafee. We have 50, 51, and 52. Who has number 53, please?
No one shows up?
Unless if Greg Stahl can stop getting in the way.
See what number having release control?
I need photobombing.
Take that and we plug that in.
Wait, just tell me to move.
No, it's straight. You can be like behind somebody, just give a funny face.
I thought tying the paper was like that. I didn't recognize you with the mustache. No, guy. No, I don't.
We're going to meet this train here.
Number 335.
Okay. So you just watch it come by. We got to wait for it. Yeah. Once he gets out of the way, then we can take off, right? Watch my feet.
No, I am not the British.
Okay, Isabella, we're going to go ahead and stop your train right about here. Now listen, this is going to talk to us a little bit. It's going to talk to us.
Yeah, there you go.
You need to clear the last switch so he can get out.
We'd like to thank everybody for their
Ready?
patience
Let's
this
listen. He's going to
afternoon.
talk to us. So just watch your back of your train.
Absolutely no question in my mind. The junior engineer is
Watch
the
your
most
back of your
popular
train. He's got to
system.
clear that switch so he can take off. All right.
Everybody wants to...
All right, buddy. All right, let's good. Now, make your train go faster.
Nothing but pitch. Well, I'm doing nothing but use when I say that.
All right, you're in charge.
You ready to drive some trains, man? You ready? Drive some trains?
I've been there.
Thank you. Jan?
I think for some reason, they got it all wrong. Generator is supposed to be right there. Unless if the generator has its coupler broken. Check it all out. Seth Branson. So, Mr. Cal Winter, I just saw your face up on the TV screen. What's up? How you doing? I'm doing good. Just saw you on the TV screen.
Yeah.
So, you're like, what? Interesting. So now you gone famous. You got your face out there now. So this basically shows on the Florida East Coast Railway, what do we have mapped out here at the Trains event. Mapo 7, Dining Yard, 100 Airport Road. So if I come out a little bit, basically maps out where is where. Mapo 212. Here we are. Caboose Jackson.
Keep going. We're on the side.
Who has number 55, please? Would they go up to him? Whoever has number 55?
Mr. Tom Byron setting up for his shot.
55. The East Coast Railway Society would like to thank all our fans and friends for joining us today, especially this afternoon. Our most popular segment of the entire day, of course, is Junior Engineer. I can tell just by looking at all the young faces, all the smiles all the way around the room. Thanks for joining us. We're delighted that you're here today.
Oh yeah, all over the road.
It'll be on my Ustream account, but not only that, it'll be on my YouTube channel.
And that's just called number 55, right? Who has number 56?
Well,
who has committed
Coming at you, Lowe's.
Tommy, my name's Tommy also. Oh, all right. Look at the church. Good money. I was like, because I had the shirt set out for the day, I already had it, like, I ended up finding it, like, a month before. I was like, I gotta wear it today. I gotta wear it today. Key. Gotta wear it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got a hot spot. My phone is hot, basically.
I'm just looking over
Sorry for the noise. There's one interesting part about this whole setup here. It's the Jupiter drawbridge. Mr. Tom Loesch, who is somewhere, let her rip that. Tom Loesch, he's all the way down at Hialeah Yard. The thing with Jupiter drawbridge, as you can see right now, is the bridge actually moves up, and which is like the coolest thing. So we have some mobility on the railroad besides just the trains. The interesting thing about the Jupiter drawbridge is that the lights actually coordinate to when the bridge is up and when the bridge is down. You can probably hardly see it, but at the bottom center of your screen, both lights are red. On the other side, the signals display red over yellow. That's because there was a little short in the wiring, so the red bulb got burnt out, but it's only the yellow. So yellow pretty much means same thing a little bit. Now, as you see, the bridge is back down, and the light is now green, same as the other side. With the boat, when the bridge is down, the light will turn red. But as the bridge is up, in the fully raised position, the light will be green for the boat. Yeah, you don't want your train breaking in half. That's the worst. It derailed. That's worse. That is worse.
It's gotta adjust the switch back.
Oh, man.
Can you take one picture? My husband works for GE.
Oh! Ah! So touchable sensitive.
Okay. I know it's not really going.
You can turn it now.
It's not.
Okay, 1 second. You want the picture?
That's okay.
Coming at you. All right, get back up and get out of your way. Okay.
For our East Coast Railway Society, we'd like to thank all our friends and fans for joining us this afternoon.
We're backing up. Oh!
Stop it again.
Wait, you're good.
Is that Gecko? Stop the Gecko.
Okay. Switch, I think. Okay, you're good.
I'm a dead gecko, I think.
That's supposed to be an alligator.
Just when you think you have it.
It's supposed to be an alligator?
Real dead Gecko?
Yep, yeah, it is. I just screwed it on there.
Whoa, going a little too fast.
Dead gecko? That?
Stop. Oh. Gotta go slow.
Don't go over halfway. Go ahead and stop right here. Just clear the switch. The back switch. The back of the frame. Good. Is it not? There you go. Stop. Excellent.
Always align your switches.
And if you see Caboose Mikey, he'll go ahead and punch a card for you. All right.
Hey, Danny.
Now, Mr. Dave Shelley, you driven the full scale one.
That's all I need. Okay.
That's your second thing driving, huh? Second thing you drive besides the truck.
My truck, my car, and the train.
Don't you have like a bumper sticker or something?
We're heading north up to This makes me nervous. It comes off the track.
Oh yeah, way too much. You know, like you break a knuckle here, you break a knuckle on this one. That's so tedious.
Well, we can hide that quick though. All you gotta do is move the car.
You can hide that quick, but with a full-size train, you can't really do anything about it.
We can't cover that one up.
No, too big, too big. I'm wondering if they're gonna redo this whole layout when All Aboard Florida comes through.
They might double track.
That means a lot of work that's got to go into this.
He even got the Loran Rail brand.
You see it running.
Don't tell me.
It has light.
Oh no, it doesn't spark, does it?
It does. Simulated. Yeah.
And even the Jupiter drawbridge, that's a hit.
Yeah, I heard it goes down kind of quick.
Oh, not too quick. Reasonable speed going down and reasonable speed going up. Just want to let you guys know that dead lizard is glued. So yeah, can't do anything about it.
No, NASA Railroad, but we don't have that river now. Yeah, all FEC.
Friends, while Rich Clemens is here, I want to thank Mr. Rich Clemens for coming by. I'm going to ask Rich to put on a little clinic for us while we're waiting. Rich, step right over here, Rich. Step right down. Rich is brought, and I'm going to get him to describe it, the insides of a signal machine. The train engineers and conductors look down the tracks and they see this particular apparatus. It changes colors, and the color change, called an aspect,
Yes, it's glued to layout, people.
Rich has this one rigged up on electric power and can show you exactly how it works. The interior lens changes colors, protected by the exterior lens and another web. And just like so, these lenses are precision ground. They are Fresnel lenses and they shine for more than a mile in the distance.
We're going to move to City Point, ladies and gentlemen.
It gives our engineer crews a chance to see.
Oh, not so much of a good view.
Greg, we lost.
That's number 63, please. Mayor Paul, 63, West 64.
Yeah, working over 5.
65, 65, please.
Over down.
Dorian is our next junior operator.
Short.
Dorian.
Yeah. Bob. Short. It's somewhere.
No, they aren't.
We're back on back.
Somebody let me stop your train right here. I'll be out of your way here in a second.
Where are you going?
Let's stop it. I got you routed for the secondary traffic.
Running from somebody yet? Where am I?
You're right here. Actually, you're set up to get out.
Way up, yeah. Go ahead.
Set that switch, please.
Have you run yet?
No, I don't.
Did you run with us last year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, you're ready for the signing. Put it that way. Put it that way. There's your gas.
You're set.
And your line. Go.
I can take some with this. If they're elected, you decide. I'll take over.
You are the next one, number 65. 65, you want 66, please.
What's your name? Save you. Telling you how to get through your next section track here. But this is your train. Maybe go faster. You're all set?
Easy, easy. Put it on about noon. There you go. Okay, we're going to hold that speed around.
This is but there were. And we rely on, I do a couple months. Oh! All the areas that we I'm running the train.
Okay, we're going to be heading away.
Ticket number 66, please. Who has 66? 67. At caught up and given every child a train ride, that is great news. I missed 66, but I found 67. You'll be next to you, my daddy.
Sorry for the stationed, but Kit will be coming around here. He'll be driving a train. You'll see people are coming in. East Coast Railway Society would like to thank all our fans and friends for joining us this afternoon for Trains, Trains, Trains. There's no question. Our most successful and popular segment is Junior Engineer. There's no question. Let's take a look at the faces all around the railway.
You got anybody else?
So when I ask, are there any children that we have missed? Is there any child that would like to run the train that has not had a chance? Then I have great news for those who really love trains. Let's run them. That's exactly what happens with engineers on the FEC Railway. The FEC Railway engineers start the same way. They qualify at the south end of the railroad. Would you like to run again? And after they qualify on the south end, they get promoted to the north end. I'd like to ask, is there any child that we have missed? We apologize, and we would like to make that up right now. If we've skipped you, please let me know right now. And we'll give you a chance to run train.
Well, yeah. But I need to decompress. Set for the loop? Yes. Loop 2.
Go round, yeah?
Good. Extend out. Make sure. It's a couple of programs. Everybody slows it down.
But you know what, there was another
This is ready to go right here.
If we've missed any child, if there's any child who has not had a chance to run the train, please let me know right now. We don't want to miss anybody.
I'll take it from here.
Those who would like a second opportunity, glad to have you.
Hey, Jenny.
Thank you.
Yeah, right to north end. Yeah. Hey, Jenny, I'm ready.
Is there any child who did not get a chance to run a train? Is there anybody who would like to run a train? No, not you, Tom Chafee. Anybody else in here would like to run a train? This is your opportunity. Weston, how about? Weston would like to run the north end.
All right.
Okay. Austin ready for an engineer. Weston, go over here to Austin.
You guys are going to get a little bit of a back view of what's going on. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere.
You know, I work with a guy in Jacksonville. He can do it. And I get on our shuttle bus to work every morning. And man, that's amazing. Crazy.
Here we are at City Point. See,
Tracking the switches a little bit.
remote control group, I think. I'm gonna put this back right here real quick.
Who did not get a chance to run a train? Denny, we have a young man right here.
Ready to drive that train for real. Gonna face it back to City Point.
East Coast Railway Society would like to thank our fans and friends for coming out this afternoon. We'd like to thank all the FEC Railway employees who come by to snoop and see what's going on today, too. There's engineers, there's signalmen, there's all kinds of folks on. Glad to have you. Have we missed any child? If there's a child who would like to run the train, please hold your hand up and we'll let you run the train right now. Anyone that we missed?
Good job. All right.
there is any child who would like to run a train, we have an opportunity right now, right in the center of the railroad, one at Titusville and one at Cocoa. Anyone who would like to take a train there? Tony would like to run a train.
Did you make this clip already? I think you have. All right. You remember how to do it.
If we've missed any young person, if there's any child here who has not had a chance to run a train, please let me know. We have two more. Do we have two engineers?
Give it some gas, honey. Give it some gas. Faster. You're good. Yep.
Are there any children in the building that did not get a chance to run the train?
Keep an eye on it.
We don't want to miss anybody, let me know.
Right here. Okay, like right across the here.
Thank you. I'm losing my voice.
I guess that's I-95. No, this would be. Oh, okay. I've never seen something like that.
Do we have an engineer? Do we have an open train? We have children. Next train is
Right across from the old Sears counter.
Train engineer number 70. This one, I'd like to come right over here and go to Austin. 71 is next.
This is the back side. The industrial area is actually right here. This is the back side of it.
We have 70, 71. Is there a ticket number 72, please? Who has 72?
We got the 336.
That's an awful fancy Unipod you got there.
Oh yeah. Cup holder and everything on the bottom.
Go over the bridge, circle around. You want to go a little bit slower. Go through City Point.
It's going to be going through City Point. How about that?
I've already skipped like 2 trains.
As we look at the ticket draw.
While we're waiting, going to introduce Mr. Rich Clemens. Rich, member of the FECRS, has brought along a special signal for us. We'd like to thank him very, very much. Over here at this front counter, Rich brought along the interior parts of a signal system. I will step back out of the way. And he will demonstrate how this machine gives indications and aspects. And I know David knows about those terms. The aspect is the part that you see. The indication is the information that the signal transfers to you. If you see a green signal shining down the line,
don't turn it, don't turn
the
it.
track is clear ahead.
He's right there.
As the signal changes, there's a motor on the inside. The train goes by.
I know.
What we call drops to red.
We're going too
Red,
fast.
of course, everybody knows means stop. It means there's a train in front of you. As the train moves up to the next block, and one set of tracks is empty, it becomes yellow. That yellow is called approach. So we've got clear, approach, and stop. The three basic signals that all train crews need to obey to be safe on the railroad. I'd like to thank Mr. Rich Willis for bringing this machine down and showing off. Thank you very much. Have I missed anybody? Are there any children who still need a train ride that we did not get a ride? Right this way.
Alrighty. And you're off and running. Hey, look, we're going to meet you in all day. Alrighty. So we got a train to meet Mayo here. Oh, perfect. Alright, so.
Number 75. We have Andrews right here, right this way. Danny, which one? Austin. Austin is ready for you. Right here. Number 76, which child is pick number 76. Up this way.
As soon as this train comes through, we're going. We're going backwards.
Yeah, there's a motorcycle and a lizard. There's a lizard.
Look, that's the drove through that on this RV school. We're going to stop on something about right to get closer to start turning the slow it down. We're going to try and stop it right
Coming down the main.
Use the remote halfway.
Wait, nope, that's
What's that lizard?
young man named Sherry. Is there any child that did not get a ride on the train? 78? Who's 78? Which one is 78? 79. Is there any child that did not get a train ride? Which child has ticket number 78, please? 78? 79? Did we miss anybody? Did I miss any child? We don't want anybody to go home. Did you get right? No. I have one right here, number 76. Gage is coming home. Congratulations to our newest junior engineer.
Come through.
I have 70.
Keep an eye on the back of your train.
You guys
Have
operating?
we missed any child? Is there any child who did not get a train ride today? Oh, yes, indeed. We have a train available right here.
All right. Mr. Rich Clemens, can you show to the Ustream people how this little mechanism works?
Sure. Come a little closer.
So this right here is a Type SA1 searchlight mechanism. Mr. Rich Clemens has brought it in for us. See how it's green? When he presses it, notice that it turns to red. But notice that the light doesn't come on until it's fully in position. It turns into yellow. When it turns to green, notice that the buttons are coordinated to what it's showing. And if you can, and the power is off. Can you show us the inside? So basically, you can see the red, and then it goes to green, and it goes to yellow. It's the motor inside that changes it. Amazing. Is this magnetic?
Yes.
Too cool. Too cool. In case if you guys are wondering, yes, the bottom is glass.
The newer ones say from 65 on and newer are plastic.
Really?
But anything older than that is generally glass.
There you have it. Part of a search. Just put a Fresnel lens to it. There you have it. Mr. Kyle Winter. Say hello to the people on Ustream.
Hello to the people on U3. Hi, Anita, if you're still watching. Sorry you can't be here.
Tom Byron working his camera magic. I see why your videos are so awesome. You just planned this stuff out. It's all in capturing the good shot.
You're infamous. Oh, really? Fred Fraley came out. You know, Fred from Train. He came out and interviewed me and my couple of short time. Well, took a couple pictures of the thing. You know, guess what? You're in Train here. They showed me the whole article.
That's probably your early birthday present.
Yeah, well, look, I didn't. But he wants to buy one someday. He's going to do another documentary on 101 Go Down. Oh, yeah. Cool. Awesome.
I'm Bob Arts.
Alrighty, you know what to do.
Woo! Don't drop the Gatorade.
We're going to meet you. Just coming up on 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I want to say hello one more time to our friends at home on Ustream. BBT 609. Look at that address when you get home.
And it will also be on my YouTube account.
And also on Freeland's Heritage YouTube.
Which is
a chance to see the entire day as it happened in Jordan. See it again.
And Caboose.
I'm
Anita
anxious
is
to watch
watching.
it myself. Something important happening right now. The real stars of the show, of course, are the trains. Walk with me over to Cocoa Yard. There's 2 trains going by each other. 2 rock trains. Big rock jobs going on by. Oh, Jay Isaac. And we're on the move.
Hey, Dominic. You got any trespassers to yell at? All right.
Standing rock, all in hoppers on his way through the balloon track and Seaboard. Come on in, folks. Is there any child who did not get a chance to ride the train? Did everybody get a chance?
I am.
We don't want to miss anybody.
Seems to me.
Let's check out Jupiter Garbage, shall we? Alright. I'm gonna have to get under the rope and show you guys what's cool about this drawbridge. But first, I'm gonna check if any trains coming. No. Alright. So, I was explaining before, this side of the signal show green, but on the bottom one it's actually yellow. I don't know if I can come any closer. I'm afraid I'll knock something over. But it's green over yellow. The red is shot. And as you see, it's green over red, even though you can't really see the red. As I flip. Oh, wait a minute. Not gonna flip a switch yet. Because
the other train coming behind me. Got 2 trains.
We have junior engineer controlling this train. Number 109. The Tropicana juice cars on top. The FEC rock hoppers. The auto racks. And intermodal with a box car on the bottom. You're doing a good job. Alright, will do.
Okay, talk to you soon.
We have the 445 Florida East Coast Railway Speedway to America's Playground. Stopped on the brake. There we go. So, as I take this lever and I move it up, it operates. That's the cool thing about it. And the lights turn red on either side for the railroad. So the green drops to red, and the light is green. The boat's faster. And that's the cool thing about the mobility of the Jupiter drawbridge.
Vice President of FECNTRAK. Take a train. Which train is
this one, right here.
202.
Now, we'll actually running in back
Got the racks on top and the intermodal on the bottom.
Oh, wait.
Bridge is up. Bridge is up.
We have to wait for
down there, and I can never get the guy to sell it to me.
Caboose Anita is watching at home.
Hi, Miss Anita. I miss you.
And Mr. Tony Guido is
Hello.
waving as well. So she got her way. Mr. Tom Lowe.
Come right around here and just keep other people from coming in. Because I'm going to give you a train down here. Okay. Two things you have to do is speed up or slow down. Rotate right, makes it go faster. Twist it back, slower and stop. Okay? That's your train. We're heading to the blue track at Highland Yard, so
You're thinking about making your own now? You're gonna
only have the time.
You're probably gonna make the detector 21.1.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're gonna do that
I
part
would
and
love to do
incorporate.
St. Augustine.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Is that how it is then once you get, well, it's not even Fellsmere, south of Palm Bay?
She's bringing it across the Roseland Trestle, coming through what we know as Caboose Junction. Mount Post 216.0.
Now we get the single track.
1,800 tons. Woo!
So you get to Medley.
Now you're in Medley.
Mile Post 369.
She got the 711 and the 419. And they are going.
you're all set. You're going to go around the balloon. Stop that train next to the other train.
Okay.
It's regular.
That's I'm also small, but you know I've never run this train out of the garages.
We don't touch his thumb up. Well, I help him with it. I install circuit boards. We make wire. Can you help?
I love this sign. Just love it. Just love it. Roseland, Fellsmere, where they all know Caboose Junction, where they live. It's Fellsmere.